Welcome to the Earn First podcast. My name is Arun Sudhaman. I'm founding editor of Earn First, and we're joined on today's episode by Christine Fellows, who's the founder of 9 by 9. Christine, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Lovely to be here, Arun.
And also joined today by Jane Morgan, who, of course, is new at Ashbury as Chief Client Officer and Head of Advisory in Singapore. Jane, welcome.
Hello, delighted to be here.
So, we are going to talk today about a new research report, the Moment of Truth report, AI and the Future of Women in the Workplace, which was commissioned by 9 by 9. But, Christine, I wonder if you could perhaps get us going by introducing 9 by 9, why it was founded, and what its mission is.
I'd love to. 9 is a not-for-profit organization. We're based here in Singapore, but Asia Pacific focused. We do research to develop an understanding of the factors that impact gender equity in the workforce, and we have a real action focus, developing sort of data-backed solutions and frameworks to drive change. So our mission is really around understanding that or our belief that a diverse workforce and diverse leadership is good for business and good for society.
Mm. And if we're talking about this research report specifically, AI and the future of women in the workplace, what was it that compelled you to look into this topic specifically?
I think it's probably very well understood by our listeners today that AI driven transformation is going to impact every area of the workforce. In fact, our data shows that 85% of companies have committed to increasing their investment in AI in the last year. But it's moving really fast and it's going to have significant workforce implications. If I could just maybe quote a couple of the global leaders in the industry, Sam Altman from OpenAI said that entire job categories are going to disappear. And Dario Modi from the Anthropic CEO has said that AI will replace 50% of entry-level white-collar roles within 5 years. I mean, there's a pile of data on this, but there are going to be significant changes. And the initial data science showed us that women will be disproportionately impacted. And so that was really the driving force behind us going to develop some data that was really Asia Pacific focused.
So, before we get into the research findings, Jane, why don't you tell us what role you played in developing this research and telling this story?
Yeah, so I was introduced to Christine by a friend and just fell in love with 9 by 9 and its mission. And I think this particular topic is just so relevant and so pressing that I really wanted to be a part of it. So my part was from a communications background, really looking at when the research came in, what it meant broadly to individuals, managers, and organizations. So really looking at the key statistics and how we were communicating those, not to scare. And I think this is, something I did want to mention here was AI is fantastic, and it's not about being worried about it. It's just about knowing what the risks are and what the opportunities are, and how corporates can utilize the data that we have that we've created, and equally how managers and individuals can use that data to enhance their own position and their own career.
Indeed. So the research report identifies 9 truths, which are all, each of them, I think, is quite significant. And of course, we won't have time to really dive into every single one. But there's certainly a pattern there in terms of a participation gap when it comes to usage of AI across the gender divide, and also in terms of how women are approaching AI adoption differently, and how that plays out both, in the workplace and beyond. So I wonder if we could start perhaps by looking at that that participation gap, what it looks like, and why it's of concern when we're talking about AI.
Shall I jump in? There's a double exposure for women.
Hmm.
So if you think of the way that the workforce is structured, both systemically, where women's roles are greatest in terms of women occupying certain sort of industries and sectors, but also with where the job opportunities are coming through in the sort of the future workforce that's going to be very much more sort of driven by AI. There's a double exposure for women. They're underrepresented in the high growth areas and overrepresented in the more administrative clerical roles that AI is going to be disrupting. The roles, and I think it's really, again, if we think positively about the enormous opportunities that AI represents to create efficiencies and productivity and ultimately growth as it expands enterprise wide, there will be a lot of new roles that AI will create. However, generally, they're likely to be sort of pipelines into those roles are coming from STEM backgrounds, and there is a disproportionate aggregation of men that are in those pipelines, whereas women are more populated in roles that could possibly be augmented, but more likely to be displaced roles. And in fact, I think it's only 29% of women globally are in the AI roles, deeply
Hmm.
underrepresented. And if you look at disrupted roles, admin roles, back office, call centers, coordinators, analysts, they do tend to be women are holding a greater share of those. So there's the challenge.
Hmm. So essentially, AI is coming more for jobs in which women are disproportionately represented. Um, we could probably say the same. Sorry, go ahead. Did you want to say something?
Yes, and the roles that are being created, women are also
Mm.
disproportionately represented in the STEM pipelines. And then in the
Hmm.
middle, there's the augmented roles. A lot of roles you'll be using AI to, or you'll be managing AI, and for other reasons regarding sort of training and confidence and structure, women are also the data shows less likely to be in those roles as well. Now, it's really
Mm.
early days. And so I think what we're really proud of with the report and our action focus that we take with 9 by 9 is we've been also able to, through the data, develop a framework for change. It's early enough in the journey that just consciousness around this and what needs to happen to make sure that we don't increase the gender gap and the opportunities and benefits of AI are going to be able to be shared equally amongst the
Mm.
workforce and the population.
Jane, how are you seeing this play out in the comms industry? Because that, of course, is a sector where women are heavily represented in terms of entry level roles, and there's plenty of research about how that balance reverses the higher up you go within the industry. How are you seeing that impact in the comms industry, both in terms of entry level roles, but also in terms of the creation of new roles and augmented positions?
So I've got a really interesting perspective because I've had about 8 months out of the industry, and whilst I was working with 9 by 9, I knew about the change and the rapid adoption. But it's interesting coming back in, even having 8 months out, it's changed, and that's just the reality in terms of services that are being offered to clients and in terms of internal usage of AI. And so, in terms of how I can see an immediate impact, there's no getting away from all of the redundancies that we can see within our industry, particularly with the holding companies at the moment and restructuring. And AI is undoubtedly a part of that because there are efficiencies that it creates, and that's just fact. But what I also see is, whilst certain roles are being made redundant, there is also this opportunity that comes with AI and how it helps us. So I don't know that, we keep having a conversation about AI and kind of negative. If you look in the media, a lot of it is negative. But actually, I think in our industry, it's really positive in terms of the the services that we can now give to clients because of AI. But that means that we now need to reskill and upskill our workforce and look at what does that mean. We aren't getting away from this. AI is here to stay. It's been here for quite some time, and it is changing. And I mean, literally every month there seems to be something else. So we have a difficult task, I think, in agency. But what I think is really important to block out the noise and just really concentrate on honestly what it means. And it's only two things, because it's only ever two things. The first one is, what does this mean for our clients? So does this mean enhanced services? Again, I've been out for a little while, and now joining Ashbury, I can see all of these services that I haven't seen before, synthetic personas in terms of crisis and issues that can be created within minutes, which is wonderful for our clients. We have an amazing research intern here who can just create, brand reputation metrics at the touch of a button for our clients, for their competitors. It's wonderful. She knows that because she's of that generation. Christine and I have talked about this many times before. I worry for myself. And I think that's something, it's really looking at every level. Who knows what? Who do we need to hire in? Who do we need to upskill and retrain? And looking at the workforce as a whole.
Mm. One of the other findings that I found very interesting as well is around the approach to AI. And in particular, you write that women are ready and motivated, but they approach AI adoption thoughtfully, seeking clarity, fairness, and competence. Meanwhile, recognition flows to those who experiment publicly and move fast, which I will assume is perhaps more often men than it is women. So men are also being favored in terms of how they adopt AI. How big of a challenge is this, and how do you think it should be addressed, Christine?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and there's so many ways that you can look at how is AI being adopted and rolled out in our organization. And to Jane's point, it'll affect young people. We will be in a different position than people who are at the most senior levels and older. Um, but what we're suggesting is also do, as you're looking at all of the other sort of structural shifts in the workforce, do be very conscious of gender, because there on many levels women will approach AI differently, and generally, particularly at this early adoption stage, it will be disadvantageous to them. In the long run, we believe that the innate characteristics of female workers are going to be incredibly beneficial. So let me give you an example. Firstly, and this is research based, so I want to also say I'm not making it's very difficult to make broad generalizations, because there are certainly women who are move fast and break things mentality, but the research in terms of generally the style of leadership and the style of AI adoption, what we've seen is that women are adopting AI with a much more measured and deliberate approach. The focus is more on accuracy, on ethics, on working within business guardrails, understanding what desired outcomes are before they move ahead, just being cautious. And in fact, our data showed us that 59% of women are waiting for sort of guidelines and policies from their employers before starting to adopt AI in the workplace. Whereas men tend to, and again, the data showed this, and I know that there will be outliers, but men tend to be a whole like, let me just get in there and use this and say I'm an expert at it. And the fact is that in an early stage where there is a real, and I think it's talked about a lot in the media, right? There's a real FOMO for organizations about AI. Everyone, I think 80% of companies are using AI in some sort of use case, or at least one function in the workplace. Only about 1% of organizations in the world have enterprise-wide rollout of AI at the moment. So again, this is a real red flag, as opposed to saying that this is not something that can be addressed. But what we're what we're seeing now in this very, very initial stage is that the companies are racing to get AI, racing to get sort of, funding for AI and to start to build out use cases and pilots and see where we can apply it. And pulling in people who certainly external employees, but also understanding the organization, who knows how to use this AI. And people are stepping up and volunteering to be in pilots and jumping in to get trained. And it tends to be more the rewards are going to those who are able to experiment and be loud about what their skills are and their aptitudes, and who are interested in taking a risk and jumping into a new business. That tends to be, from the research, it tends to be mostly men.
Mm. There's also there's a psychology concept called competence v confidence that again is proven that women tend to be more naturally inclined to mastery, and men don't have that. And so it's I when we bring this up because we can't change that. This research isn't going to change that, but what it will do is create an awareness perhaps in organizations of that genuinely scientific gender difference, and really what organizations then should be looking for. Are you looking for the person that's saying they can do all of this stuff, and is that true and genuine, or are you looking for the person that really wants to understand what they're doing before they, and from our perspective, take it to a client? Because the worst thing would be you've got someone saying, yeah, we can do it all, and they can't deliver. That's just a huge risk. But I don't know what is um, I think it's a balance. I think as women, sometimes we do want that mastery, but we can't wait with AI. It's not going to be perfect, and it's always adapting. So we've just got to start to learn a little bit more and be okay with we're not going to master everything, because we can't. But we need to understand and we need to adopt. And from the other side of it's really about not being scared of not knowing it all, and just kind of going with it, which it would appear that some men seem to do. So I don't think this, for me personally, I think it's a difficult one, that because you can't, particularly with this topic, because I don't think you can have mastery, but also I don't think you should be going, yes, I can do it all, because that's not believable and right. And I think there'll be a backlash on the business at some point, because that person or that team just won't be able to deliver.
But I'd also say that that's from an individual perspective. I'd also suggest from an organizational perspective, you want both, because that tendency for women to be a little more like, let's understand the ethical framework here, and where are our governance guidelines, and what's our data privacy, sort of looking like. That tendency for women to be a little cautious is an enormous benefit to an organization from a governance perspective. An organization who's interested in ethical AI, in protecting customers' data and privacy, wants to have and is starting to put together, ethics teams and build out governance frameworks. So you're wanting that. It's actually, I think it's a feature, not a bug of women's. However, it's just a matter, again, for organizations to be really conscious that they're going to need to reward employees in different ways. If your reward sort of system and the perception of success is based around who's delivering the quickest, sort of coolest AI pilot, women may not be in that pilot group. If you're thinking more long term or medium term or short term about where we need the skills of the future, how do we build a workforce that is going to be able to be a foundation for really solid, safe, successful AI growth, you're going to need a diverse workforce to do that. And so both of these sides are important.
Indeed, yeah, it's very interesting actually, because between the two of you, you've provided both the organizational and individual perspective, and they're both really important, I think, for this for these issues, because I don't think they'll get solved by one side or the other operating in isolation. Um, and the other thing that I think we probably should talk about is the role of HR, and of course the importance already mentioned of learning, of reskilling, um, of structured professional development programs. So the research finds, for example, that HR departments are often under-equipped to lead transformation. They need new capabilities to align technology, people, and purpose. Also, the AI learning is often optional and self-directed, which is a model that leaves many women behind. Um, so, Christine, what do you think, perhaps starting with the organizational perspective, what do you think companies, corporates should be doing to try and address this gap? Because this seems quite crucial if we're going to get to a point where this gender divide isn't so significant.
Yeah, and it's actually just a rethink of how we're structuring organizations around our AI, development, our AI rollout. And so this is, while this is a technology driven, AI is a technology driven sort of transformation of, of business. It's often not thought of as a workforce transformation. And the reality is that, that using AI to drive productivity and efficiencies and growth is going to change your workflow and processes, but it's also going to change your organizational structure, your skills requirements, the way that you are progressing people through your audience, and just the entire talent requirement of your organization. So it is as much an organizational workforce transformation as a tech transformation. So while all of this, rapid adoption, and we call it building while flying, is sort of happening, it's often that the tech is leading the charge. And HR are kind of coming in to retrofit, to find the talent or find we haven't got those skills and upskill and put in a training module. And it's certainly not effective to try to retrofit, sort of inclusion. So what needs to happen is that, and probably you mentioned it before, Arun, HR departments are totally, well, our research showed 85%, which is an enormous number, believe that AI is going to be great for business. And they know that it's going to improve productivity, and they're right behind this transformation that they can see ahead. Only 29% believe that they are equipped and have the resources and themselves have the training. It's a very different proposition looking at the future. The answer is, well, certainly where where our framework sort of came to from the data was that what is required is we call it a two in the box solution. We need HR and technology to come together behind the business goals in terms of driving AI, so that you're starting to think ahead of adoption about skills and workforce implications. And there's tremendous opportunities to make sure that you're building an equitable, a fair and a just AI future, as well as one that is going to look at good governance. I mean, what we would believe is that HI and tech, if they act together to co-lead at design stage, then you're going to look at, at pilot stage, you're looking at impact assessments. And so while you're looking at impact assessments, they're not just financial diligence. You're also looking at workforce and gender equity and other measures that will act as sort of gateways to investment decisions. What you end up with, if you can do that, what you can deliver is a gender lens across workforce decisions that will help you identify talent and workforce strategies to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to participate and benefit. Secondly, you will also be able to understand that there are the attributes around ethical, thoughtful adoption of AI are going to be equally important as how quickly we get there. And then I guess finally, just the understanding, which, there's been so much research on that most sort of most progressive companies do understand that diverse teams designing products for a population that is diverse and leading rollout are going to really ensure the strongest outcomes, not only in terms of so innovation and creativity and engaged workforce, but better financial outcomes.
Mm. Jane, how does that chime with your own personal experience in the comms sector? Do you think that consultancies are ready for this level of workplace transformation?
In the interview stage, so where we were interviewing tech and HR leaders, there's a couple of comms Holco HR leaders, and so we know from them that there is this disconnect, and they said the business is rapidly moving, and from a HR perspective, they're not 100% confident about what the skills are for this sort of next breed um, of uh, of recruits, or this next stage of the business, because it's changing all the time, or because it's rapid, or because there just hasn't been that communication. And there
Mm,
seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between, a corporate vision of how to use AI and how it's implemented and how it affects, and actually that internal communications piece. Does anyone really know? And I would argue that probably not. Some, of course, there are some making good headway, but I think broadly possibly not. I think there's a huge opportunity for HR to work with tech to just take a breather, as Christine says. And that one of my favorite captions is building while flying. Just pause for a second. What are we doing? How are we doing it? In this life, we're just constant. This is a moment in time where, for a business, it is a critical moment. You can't rush it. You've got to, yes, we've got to be agile, and yes, things are changing, but let's just be strategic about the people who are going to be in the business, because that business will
mhm,
be successful if we have the right people. If we
mhm,
if we put the not just hiring in, but our existing workforce, our existing loyal workforce, how are you helping them to adapt and change aligned with business? How are you communicating? Do they understand? Because that's great for the external reputation, and of course the internal reputation, which means much more loyalty and much more motivation to go with the business as it changes. But I think businesses,
mhm,
inclusive of communications agencies, maybe haven't landed on that, and that would be a critical point. On the training
mhm,
piece, um, I think I often see great training programs, but that are external and that are in your
mhm,
own time. And
mhm,
I'm a big believer um, of doing it as part of the working day. And the reason being, possibly, I might be biased, I don't know. I am a working mum. I have 7-year-old twins, as you know. I've got wonderful 9 by 9 position. Doing my master's, there's lots of things going on. I've got a wonderful husband who wants to talk to me about his day and about tides, and I love a tide chat, but like there's a lot going on for me in terms of the mental load. And I'm sure there are many women who this is relevant to as well. So do we want to then go home at 8:30, 9, whatever it is at nighttime when we're trying to put the kids to bed? Do you really want to then delve into this invisible additional labor piece of, oh, now I've got to learn how to use AI? I don't know that that's the right time for many reasons. One of which is that late at night right time to learn for your brain? No, studies would say no.
mhm.
Probably in the morning. Is that a right time? Is that the right environment to do it at home? Many
Yeah.
studies would say no, that requires accountability, motivation. Again, I can tell you from my master's, this is a hard slog for me to be looking at neuroscience at 9 o'clock at night. It's just, we really have to be honest about where that right environment is for our people. If you're expecting your workforce to adapt and to adopt, you need to provide the right environment for that, for them to do so. And it's not just on them. That said, I think it's also on the individual as well as the organization. They've got to come together. You can't just expect your organization to all of a sudden make you an AI whiz and get into that confident zone. You've got to work at it yourself. But I think it's a two-part process.
Mm. I've often wondered how, structured learning programs in the professional services world work with, what is it, billability utilization metrics. They don't
Yes, yes,
seem to go hand in hand
yeah.
necessarily. So it's a really important point. Also, tides. Did I catch that correctly?
Loves to chat about tides. He can talk
Tides.
to you about the sea and the
Okay.
tides and why the tides have come in and gone for hours. Next time you're
All
in
right.
Singapore, I will happily let you lead on that conversation, and
The
I'll do
Prince of
something else.
Tides. Anyway, um, Gen Z women face the greatest disruption. I think we're all kind of aware of the impact on not really the next generation, that probably they are the current generation. And the research says that they face a broken career ladder before they even begin to climb. Um, and that seems like a very fundamental challenge. What are the alternatives in terms of how Gen Z women can navigate this entry level crisis?
Look, it's really clear the gap there at entry level is men and women. All the traditional, if you think of entry level roles are the learning runways, right, where young men and women are building their networks, their confidence, their basic skills. It's the junior analysts, the coordinators, the clerical roles. um, Gen Z generally are being impacted by AI. I think the data showed that junior roles haven't been impacted. There are 39% less. In 2025, there were 39% less junior sort of entry level roles than the year prior, due to AI efficiencies. And this is happening globally. The We're talking, though, we're also suggesting, though, that the challenge from a female perspective is that if there's less entry levels, there's already as you mentioned before, the broken rung. The women are going to be anyway falling out of the workforce more in mid-career because of caregiving responsibilities, and for very many reasons, often not coming back into the workforce. And there's work to do around that in terms of giving women more flexibility. But if you have less women coming in, you have women dropping, it just is hollowing out the pipeline that gets to leadership. So it's a serious threat. If we're still in a world where leadership in the tech industry is about 12.2% female. Leadership across the board, depending on which industry, is less female. Leadership at boards, in this region, is around 20 something percent female. It's if you have another piece. By the way, women also, and I can tell you, the Singapore and just because we were doing some work in Singapore and Australia, so two of the more developed countries in our Asia Pacific region, the rates of women coming out of university qualified women, is 13 to 14% higher than university qualified men. So we are developing educated young women at greater rates. They're going into the workforce at about the same rate. But they're having less opportunities now to enter, and they're still falling off in the middle. And we've got these very, very narrow pipelines to leadership. What is the answer, I think, is the important piece, because this is just about an awareness of that and what do we do about it. I was recently with the DBS Bank, that's a significant major bank, one of the most progressive banks in the world in terms of digital banking, and are one of the companies that are at the agentic stage of AI in terms of enterprise adoption. And Sushantan, their CEO, was talking about workforce challenges. And I thought that she said it really well. It was around the responsibility of an organization to rethink the investment in talent as one that requires them to invest in entry-level talent. And so it's not a matter of, while AI is going to create enormous efficiencies and just less requirement for those roles, it's about rethinking, how do we move from an execution focus of hiring to a capability focus of hiring, which includes things like creating apprenticeship type roles. How do we put entry-level people into AI projects, in sort of shadow roles, so that they can start to look at, prompt design and AI oversight and some of those middle augmented areas. It's kind of a rethink of workforce investment to secure a talent pipeline.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting point and well made. It does require a mindset shift, perhaps, in terms of how organizations view this whole kind of entry level pipeline of talent, um, not just as a cost, perhaps, but in terms of responsibility. Jane, do you think the comms world is ready for that kind of a shift, given they have AI and they also have all kinds of other pressures, um, and has not always done the best job in the first place of making a strong case to Gen Z talent.
Yeah, I think we are in a short-term zone at the moment where we see decisions being made that will streamline companies, make them more efficient in the here and now. Possibly shareholders are very happy because things are going to go great. But then I don't know if we've thought about what happens down the line, because if you don't have that junior pipeline, what's going to happen when we all go? If you don't have people who know what we do, what's going to happen? And I don't know how you even get in there. If you think about way back when I started, it's this whole social learning piece. You're watching people in the organization. You might be doing, when I was first started, it was like press cuttings. There was no internet, but you like watching people, watching the
Mm-hmm.
seniors, how they behave in meetings.
Yeah.
You have to have that. Otherwise, there's a massive knowledge gap because
Mm-hmm.
you cannot just have someone coming from uni who, in our industry, who might be super, super academic, brilliant, but our industry is built on relationships and human touch and human knowledge and the ability to hear what isn't being said. And I don't know that under you can, but we obviously still do need that academic side because the expert level knowledge is really important. But you have to be able to fuse the two, and I don't know that you can do that unless you're allowing these juniors to come in. Now, what I would say is, again, I absolutely agree about the skills side of things because, as I say, second week here at Ashbury, and the juniors here, phenomenal, but they're doing a very different job to what I was doing when I was a junior. They're all on these AI platforms, giving up. So there are roles, but again, I think it's about defining, taking a breather, defining what the new roles are going to look like, making sure that the HR teams who have got to now recruit and retrain everybody, are they aligned with where the company is going? And do we know what
Mm-hmm.
our new workforce should look like? Now, in addition, um, I don't think that this is solely down to companies. Companies are there for a reason. They've got to turn a profit. There are many, many reasons why AI is going to make organizations efficient, and that is unfortunately going to lead to redundancies. That's just the way it is. But I think that a few things we need to think about, of course, the reskilling and what do those new roles look like, but also it's not just corporates. How are government policies backing this? How are education institutes? Because what new programs do we need to make sure it's not just the companies? It is a whole ecosystem, I think, that needs to change in order to make sure that women um, that we stop the regression essentially. But it's not just corporates again, and it's a tough gig, I think, because it is corporates, individuals, it's government, it's academic, it's everyone.
Mm. We ran a roundtable in Singapore last week, actually, with leaders from the healthcare sector, and it was looking specifically at the disruption being brought by AI. Um, and by the way, I think it was almost all women in the top comms roles. But it was interesting in that I think the big conclusion was we are all responsible for
Mm-hmm.
what happens with AI. It's not something that any of us, and it's easy, I think, for each of us to sit here and say, well, that's something that needs to be done. But I think every actor is responsible. So to conclude, what would you say are the areas of greatest urgency identified by this research, the most critical, um, as we, I guess, move into whatever the next phase of AI will be? We'll find out tomorrow, I imagine. But what do you think is I suppose keeping you awake at night and requires urgent action, Christine?
Um, the I really simply, organizations need to take a gender conscious lens to decision making around their investment in AI adoption. Um, AI adoption is going to lead to extraordinary benefits, to companies, to organizations in terms of efficiencies, to opportunities to growth, to people's careers. And our hope would be that the benefits are going to be able to apply equally to men and women. And so taking a gender filtered lens is really the core of that. But that means understanding it's not a tech initiative, it's a joint enterprise transformation. Ultimately you're looking at. It means that understanding you want to bring the human capital piece together with the technology piece right at the beginning, and do the impact analysis and the identification of processes and workflow and skills and org structure, with a view to creating the most benefit for the organization. Organizations will benefit with a diverse workforce and a diverse leadership, that we know. And what companies don't know is that there's a gender piece in this. And the many companies that I am, or the companies that I'm involved with, are doing incredible things with AI. And it's just often not one of the initial thoughts. There's so much to think about, around the thing. So again, really simply to me, it's take a gender conscious filter. Make sure that you're bringing together the human capital piece along with the initial considerations around your AI adoption, and to know that there are a lot of really, really, really practical, tactical things that can be done both at an organization level and a managerial level, as well as for us as individuals. And the last one is that with 9 by 9, we do take a real action oriented approach, and we've developed a framework for change that addresses each of those constituents. And there's some really clear opportunities for companies to start to think about what they're doing with, their training programs, their internal versus external hiring, the way that they're measuring many, many steps along the AI chain, the way that they're upskilling and developing talent, the type of talent that they're showcasing and role modeling and rewarding. And there's just a lot that can be done sort of right now. So this is not we're here to just wave a red flag as opposed to say it's all a disaster. But there's some really big warning signs there right now.
Sure, but it's reassuring, I think, because you're right. I feel like this idea of workplace transformation is only just starting to register, and particularly in terms of gender. But I do think there's just a level of intimidation as well. So the message that there are frameworks, there are steps, and there are plans that organizations can adopt is welcome. Jane, you get the final word.
From a 9 by 9 perspective, we are a non-for-profit. So this research that we do is really because we're so passionate about the topic, and we want to give proven data points to corporates in order that they can make a change. I think for us, if we had the time, we would be going into every organization that we could, kind of preaching this word and showing the action framework and trying to get change on the go. I think for us, success is going to look like if 2 or 3 organizations take our action framework and start going with it. That for us is the ball rolling, and I think we'd be super proud of that. On that, if anyone listening to this would like a further chat, please do reach out. We've got amazing partners with LinkedIn and HSBC, and we have such a wonderful launch a few months ago with 200 senior leaders in Singapore, Straits Times, Salvador's Business Times, Money FM, Astro One, and now First is obviously the pinnacle of that media coverage. But it is a conversation that is it was saved the best till the end. But it's a conversation that's happening, but we don't want to stop there. It's not about the research is not the end product. The research is the start. The change has got to come, but we are a non-for-profit. So we would love download the report. It's on the website or it's on our social channels. Or please do reach out. We're more than happy to chat. Or if you want to be involved, again, we've got some great brands, corporate brands already involved. From a comms industry perspective, I do not profess to have all the answers, and I'm sure no one does. I think it really is about, as always, do you understand your workforce? If you don't, you need to communicate to your people. You need to ask questions. You need to see where they're at. Are they aligned with your vision? Are they aligned with your expectations? Do you need to rewrite your job descriptions? There are so many questions, but if you don't have that data, you won't know. So get the data, act on the data, and please use this as a starting point to be aware and to raise awareness within your leadership that unless you act, there will be a critical negative consequence for women. There won't be if we really start to look at what the problem could be and come up with solutions. You know. And I think on an industry-wide perspective, I would, I love getting everybody together, but I would love, there's so much chatter about how every organization is using AI differently or what it means for them. I don't know that we should be letting AI dictate to our industry. I think we should be saying, this is how we're going to use AI for our clients and for us. So we kind of start to take it and roll with it. We're not letting AI tell us what's going to happen. We're going to use that and we're going to control it ourselves. So I think there's so many great conversations still to be had. I think this is just the start, but that change does need to be made.
Well, maybe you can lead an industry task force. That could be another thing for you to do, perhaps.
I'll put that on my mental load. You take tides, I'll take industry task force.
Excellent. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Christine. Really, both an interesting, somewhat worrying, but important conversation. And I suspect we will have more of these conversations as we see AI transforming all facets of the way we live and the way we work. So thank you to you both. Thank you to 9x9. And of course, as always, a big thanks to our production partners at Earshot Media. Thank you all for listening to the Earned First podcast.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.